Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to this episode of the Sonic Sync podcast. Today, I am with Peter. Peter, how you doing, my man? Thank you so much for joining.
Happy to be here. So doing all right.
So, for everybody that's listening, Peter runs and manages the IT and security infrastructure over at Above Lending, and has really been an honor kind of connecting earlier. And we appreciate your time here. So, why don't you kick this off and let us know a little bit more about your background, kind of how you got to where you're at, so people to know a little bit more on why they should hear out more of
I
this
I,
episode.
I think like a lot of people in security, I came in through a side door. In my particular case, I started my IT career, I guess in a sense, at the University of Virginia, where I was working on a PhD in English literature. Um, what was happening in the mid '90s when I was working on my PhD was that there were a number of libraries that are looking to put the great works of literature online using SGML tagging because HTML wasn't a thing yet. And so what most of those libraries did, University of Iowa and there are a bunch of other ones, they would hire computer science graduate students and teach them a little bit about Moby Dick. What they did at the University of Virginia, because the PhD program in English Lit had a very strong background in textual editing and descriptive bibliography, so you knew what the right edition of Moby Dick was. uh, they took English literature students and taught them a little bit about computer science. And at a certain point, it became very clear that one of those was going to lead to a career. And because the faculty members who had been hired to teach the baby boomers that were all supposed to retire didn't, I went off, as did my wife, into IT, or tech as it was at the time. She became a software developer using her PhD in English literature for good, and I became. In those days, the job was called sysadmin. Uh, I was the non-developer on the tech team, so I handled hardware and IT infrastructure, as we call it today, and networking and security. So that's where I started. And as time has gone by, uh, basically, I've gone from on-prem to colos to the cloud. And likewise, all that time I learned how to configure a Cisco router has all gone away since who has to deal with a router on-prem anymore? So now I'm at Above Lending after most of my career in specific finance, specifically trading capital markets, and then foreign currency for a long time. And now I'm in consumer lending.
So, can you kind of share with us some insights into kind of the current landscape with lending companies in terms of cybersecurity and sort of like challenges they face?
Sure. I mean, the biggest challenge I think is that I'll put it we in our particular case at Above Lending, we are a relatively small company, under 200 employees, in a highly regulated uh, space. Uh, we facilitate loans. So what that means is that we have a security posture uh, much more extensive than you would expect for a company our size. And that's just because, how put it, the world doesn't care if you're giving out one loan or 50,000 loans. You're on the hook with all of the fun of SOC 1 and SOC 2 and making sure that PII is not being leaked and uh, DLP and all those fun acronyms. So I've got a full soup to nuts stack of security platforms. And because we're a modern, I guess we'd call ourselves a fintech. Um, we have so many software as a service vendors because, uh, you know, I'm old enough to remember when you would develop all these things in house, and now you put together a company like it's Lego blocks of, we're going to do this with this vendor and this with this vendor and this with this vendor. So there's a lot more IT as it's being currently defined as that with that sort of stuff. And then we've got the same problems everybody else does in terms of um, hybrid's here to stay. I mean, a fully remote seems to be being dialed back, but uh, you know knowledge workers, especially at the executive level, especially software developers, especially high level technologists. We're not going to go into an office 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. People are going to work remotely sometimes. And you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound with that sort of stuff, right? The minute you have some people working a little bit remote, you've got to change your security posture rather radically. So for us, for everybody, we're now looking at, endpoints, devices, laptops, to put it less generically. And that's where the security lives. It doesn't live at the perimeter in an office building like it used to. It doesn't live in my phone closet anymore.
What's the mindset shift that you need to have if you had like work from home users versus people working from an office?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is you hope that their home internet is pretty good, but you're going to have to test that sort of thing. Um, how put it? Do you put them on Ethernet or do you have them working on Wi-Fi? As long as you can be guaranteed that the connections are encrypted, well, you can probably have them on Wi-Fi. But if not, I mean, a Wi-Fi is a radio. You're broadcasting that traffic, uh, you know, to their local neighborhood. And the other piece that you have to think about is, again, you're thinking about how put it, the perimeter of your security is the four corners of the laptop. It's no longer um, you know when I used to work for let's just say a large bank that shall remain nameless. Um, I mean, how put it, tight as a drum at the perimeter. Where the company touched the internet in very few places. And in those days, the web was still a new thing, and sometimes you just only let a few people have that access. Um, and it was mushy as hell on the inside, right? Nobody was worried about, a desktop, being locked down. Certainly not in terms of its network. Now, of course, we have to think about that all the time. The firewall is on your laptop. The firewall is not a box in a phone closet, in the office, sort of thing.
Mhm.
So it's and what that also means is now you're using tools because you used to be able to write one set of firewall rules and whatever you were using, F5 or IP tables or any of that sort of stuff. And now you have to think about it like, how many employees do you have? That's how many firewalls you're running.
So, are there any sort of, I guess, methodologies that you'd recommend companies to follow if they're looking to switch to a work from home, type of environment?
I mean, the biggest methodologies you're going to have how put it, uh, a new set of vendors and ultimately a set of agents running on all the individual laptops. I don't want to go into who all my vendors are, but I have, and I should also state for the record, because my legal team told me, the opinions expressed here are my own and not those of Above Lending Incorporated. But if you knew me, you'd know that there's no way that a corporation would agree with all the things I'm going to say. Um, you know, but the larger issue is you're going to have little pieces of software running on everybody's laptop, and you're going to be monitoring that and trying to keep all of those ducks in a row. Be it patching, be it a SIM, be it it used to be an EDM and now it's an XDR, right? I mean, there are things that are going to be scanning, looking, remediating in some cases on all of your machines. And now your job is to detect trends, really. Um, you know, how put it, dashboards where you're saying, okay, we are 92% compliant in terms of our patches. Okay, where are the problem areas? Who's not getting patched and why? Or, uh, it looks like, all of all of the things that are being reported on our laptops are being reported to benign, but boy, it's up 15% from last month. So, okay, what's going on here? Um, so it's that sort of, how put it, broad-based statistical. It's almost like, polling. You're looking at large trends. You're not looking at uh, how's my Sun Solaris server doing these days, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
You're not, yeah.
So
Uh,
how does someone, because I know you're very well optimized with your workflow. So are you leveraging like, new upcoming technologies like AI within your security stack? And if so, like how is that being implemented?
I'm not really using AI in the security stack. I mean, I put it, someone was saying recently, like, what's the impact of AI on cybersecurity? And my immediate thought was, well, the phishing is going to get better, right? I mean, the grammar is going to be correct in the spam emails now, and I think we're seeing a fair amount that I put it. The script kiddies are weaponized now. You know, AI, and I want to be clear that when I'm saying AI in this context, I'm really talking about the large language models, right? It's the chat GPTs, the ones we're all talking about. Siri is going to be now AI enabled, and how put it? So it's not how put it. Large language models aren't coming up with original thoughts. They're very, very good at synthesizing what's out there, right? Summarizing. If you want to do one of the more interesting things I saw somebody do recently with AI is that uh, they had an API and a client that said to them, uh, can you give me code for this API in Java? Well, they weren't a Java shop, so the guy went to ChatGPT and said, "Here's the API documentation. Write me a Java piece of code that'll talk to this API," and it did it in an instant. Um, Again, that's not thinking, that's just synthesizing what's already out there, right?
Yeah.
And what that means is, what we used to call the script kiddies, I guess in some circles they're still called that, are now going, anytime there's going to be some sort of, whole exploit out in the wild, you're going to see hundreds of very similar bots beating on your network, right? Because uh, it's not even a copy paste anymore. You can just tell the AI, I want something that'll probe this or run try and do a buffer overflow or something like that on this particular item. Especially once a CVE is out. Well, I mean, you should just assume that uh, if there's a CVE out there, people then many people aggressively trying to make that exploit. So, our everything I've been seeing from the data recently is that the time between a CVE being released or a critical patch going out and that exploit being hit is now you know uh, 24 hours as opposed to a week, right? You used to be able to say, if you got it within a week, and it's no longer the case.
Yeah. So, what I find the most interesting is just you bring up how like with AI comes also a new kind of scene of threats that we have to deal with,
Yeah,
right? That before like wasn't necessarily there. So, another thing too, I'm curious. So like when it comes to like balancing security measures that you're implementing versus especially in the financial space, because I feel like I was telling you this when we were talking the other day, like, very high energy, you guys are making money. It's all, when it comes to like the money industry, it's like it just operates very differently and it moves very fast. So how do you kind of approach the balance of having these security measures in place and also making sure that your users are not necessarily complaining from like convenience issues or saying, hey, this is too much, I don't like it.
no, I mean there are some. Well, I mean, how I'd say the biggest thing you do is you try and make the security as invisible to the end user as possible, right? And again, that comes from little pieces of software running on everybody's laptop, right? Meaning that you are not required to report in, with the XDR. What do I need from my users? Uh, don't click on links, that are sent to you in email, and make sure you're set up with MFA on everything. And to some extent, that also means I'm going to mandate that MFA is set up on anything. That's probably the biggest complaint these days, right? Because in the past 5 years, let's say roughly, um, I've gone from, you know, uh, the Google Authenticator or Authy or whatever I'm using on my phone having a couple of accounts to I think I'm up to over 2 dozen, right? Every vendor that I touch these days, I've got a different MFA code. And that is starting to, I guess I will say, break the bank in certain respects,
Uh,
meaning, and that's why we're now, how about it used to be, uh, trying to keep track of all your passwords was a nightmare, right? Especially when back in the bad old days, we thought the solution to that was we're going to make you change your password every 30, 60, 90 days. And, you know, people figured out, ways around it, right?
yeah.
Uh, bad dog with a 076. And then, next time it was bad dog 77. So then the passwords kept getting more and more complicated to the point where we all had to start using password managers, right? So everybody's got a password manager built into whether it's, Bitwarden or 1Password or some extension in your browser or the Google password manager. I don't know anybody that's got all of their passwords memorized anymore. Because it got to be too much. And now MFA is getting to be too much, which is why increasingly we're doing single sign on and we're increasingly doing, you know, uh, biometrics, right? I've now got more and more vendors that are like, we'll just do something, we'll do a certificate on your laptop, just put your finger on the little button and that's going to be your MFA. Because heck, I've got it built into my phone, uh, and I've got it built into my watch, and I'm still punching in a 6-digit code multiple times a day for the and I think what you're going to see is, especially sort of in the security realm, but all of them, right? If you're a vendor that has MFA set up, great, good for you, because at this point it's mandatory. But pretty soon, I think SSO is going to be mandatory because you're too much of a pain to deal with unless you also have an SSO component, so that my users, sign in once at the beginning of the day and then they're good. Um, and to some extent, that's nothing new, right? We used to be, throwing Kerberos tokens around and that sort of thing. This is just an externalized version of that.
Yeah. No, no, for sure. I asked that because, like, it's just every industry has its own issues and every company has its own user challenges, I feel. But
Yeah, I mean, and how put it? I will say, there's also a balance in terms of, uh, patching, right? Um, the past couple of months this year have been particularly brutal, it seems to me, in terms of uh, there's a new critical browser patch a week, right? It feels like it's been, I haven't cracked it precisely, but, you know, Chrome has needed a new patch and Microsoft Edge have been needing a new critical patch once a week since, I don't know, the spring, at least. Um, and I put the real balance for me is, uh, you know, I put it right now. I am still relying on my users to restart their browser. Um, you know, and this is the balance that all of us face, right?
mm,
Do you restart? Do I restart the browser for you, or can you be trusted to restart the browser? Um, there are certain procedures we do where, uh, you know, I'm going to ask you nice 2 times, with a little window that pops up on your laptop to please reboot because you have a patch that requires rebooting. You're allowed to defer it twice um, because sometimes you're in the middle of something. I get it. The third time, I'm just going to reboot it. Right? You get 2 times to say not now, and then it gives you a countdown. Um,
Good
so
luck.
that's the sort of balance you're looking at, right? I mean, uh, I don't want to just be hard rebooting people's machines. That's a way for security people to get resented.
Yeah.
So my balance is I'm going to ask you nice twice, and then we're just going to do it because I can't, you know, to the earlier point, I cannot wait weeks, you know, days even in some cases for some executive to get around to rebooting their computer because they're busy, they're in the middle of stuff. The reality too, as we both know, is that Chrome will give you your Windows back.
Yeah.
Just a reboot takes a minute and a half in most cases, right? If it's a big patch on Windows, fine, it's 5 minutes. Go get a cup of coffee. I mean, it's really not that onerous, but people feel it is. So you have to balance it. That's all.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate your time here today. So I'm curious, like, finally, my question for you is like any
Yeah.
people trying to get into the industry, specifically in the financial space and kind of succeed in technology, like what advice would you give them?
I mean, to some extent, it's like make sure you have the right mindset. The how to put it. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with the book The Cuckoo's Egg. Um, One of the early, cyber hunt books. A guy named Clifford Stahl. He was an astronomer. He was not a sysadmin per se, and he was in charge of billing at UC Berkeley, if I remember correctly.
Hmm.
And in those days, the billing, on a mainframe, was parceled out, right? And it was 8 cents off, and that bothered him. And it turns out that the reason it was 8 cents off is there was a guy on his computer, and it led to an international hacking ring. Um, if you're the sort of person that looks at, how to put it, if you go into how to put it, Gmail, right, and you say, how many Gmail accounts do I have? And it's and you go and you check the number periodically, and that's not right. I have you know X number of employees, and this is way higher than that. If that doesn't bother you, you should find something else to do with your life, because what makes you good at this is that needs to bother you, right?
Yeah.
The number of machines you have, devices you have in one of your security platforms. If you don't have a really good sense in your head how many you should have, and if that number is off, you're going to spend an hour or two with a spreadsheet and a list to try and figure out where's this extra machine coming from, or how come why am I missing a couple? That's the sort of mindset I think you need to have. And I mean, just curious. I mean, part of it is just curiosity, right? Um, I'm probably outing myself in a sense here, but I've never taken a formal computer science class. Uh, it was O'Reilly books and, you know, uh, reading documentation and manuals. You can do that. And if you're curious enough to do that, then that's the piece that's going to make for a long career. I mean, at this point, I've forgotten so many things because they're no longer. I mean, you know, I used to uh, configure switches and hubs, then switches, then routers. None of that matters anymore. We're all on Wi-Fi. I mean, I've got a patch panel in a closet, but it doesn't. That's no longer a big part of my job. Neither is hardware, right? So that the world is going to change.
Hmm.
That IT is going to change. So just continue to be curious, and you'll never be obsolete.
I love it. I love it. Peter, where can people find you online?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm officially Peter-John. That's a small J. Blame my mother. Byrnes on LinkedIn, and I'm on the various socials and such. But LinkedIn if I'm wearing my professional hat.
Okay, awesome. Well, hey, Peter, thank you so much for hopping on. And for everybody that's listening, we appreciate you a ton. If you guys enjoyed, please remember to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more content. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks very much.